Okay, hello, good evening, and welcome to actually the last lecture of this HTA lecture series titled Performance Protections and Politics of Insecurity. And it is my really big pleasure to welcome Arkadi Zaides tonight, who is a dear colleague and friend, and who some of you might know both as a choreographer, artist, but also from writings and a research-based project that has been doing. So Arkadi, I will briefly introduce you. Arkadi is a choreographer, visual artist, and currently based between France and Brussels. And in Antwerp, at the University of Antwerp, conducting a practice-led artistic PhD. His work has been shown really internationally in theaters, museums, but also in curatorial contexts that he was engaged in, that was basically co-conducting. One of the projects I had the pleasure to work with Arkadi, it was titled Violence of Inscriptions, and actually we have been busy with questions of what does it mean of being able, having the capacity, but also having the right to have a body and to maintain a body. So things that are also questions leading this lecture series. Arkadi is trained as a dancer, has been working with Batsheva company, for example, Yasmin Goder, but also since more than 15 years now has been conducting a career as international choreographer. There is many prizes, and I would like to say also writings, Arkadi, that you have been publishing around your artistic research in the last years. One concept that is also kind of a key concept to your artistic PhD at the moment is the idea of documentary choreographer that I think you will also bring to us in the lecture tonight. So welcome and thank you very much for joining us. We look forward.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And thank you also to Bojana and Francesca for this kind invitation. And it's an honor to end this series with such an amazing speakers and thinkers. So indeed, like Sandra mentioned, I will start with sharing with you some thoughts about the idea of documentary choreography, and then I would like to focus on two recent projects of mine that somehow use this notion as a key, let's say, strategy, and basically question how choreography can deal with documentary materials. And I will read a text, and Sandra will help me with some images and videos. So for about a century, documentary theater has reconstructed factual information in order to analyze a specific event or phenomenon. Visual art and filmmakers joined this trend later on, demonstrating how factual information can be altered and questioned. In the last decades, technological developments and the growing access to information through the use of the internet have increased this interest in embedding elements from reality into performance. The reenactment theater plays of Mila Rao, the lecture performances of Rabbi Rouet, or the hybrid installations of Walid Raad, among others, propose complex dispositives and dramaturgy, and have proven that the performance art can criticize representation and question our modes of engaging with reality. The field of choreography is driven by critical experimentation, but remains largely uncharted when it comes to adopting elements of reality into its corpus. Choreographers often include documentary elements like photos, videos, or texts as sources of inspiration in their artistic process, but little of these elements remain in the final stage work. The intersection between choreographic and documentary practices, however, opens possibilities to articulate new modes of engagement and intervention in social and political topics. Some choreographers, such as Sandra Noeth, Olga de Soto, Farah Saleh, Esther Salomon, insist on leaving an apparent trace of the extra aesthetic materials in some of their work by deploying other media. By integrating interviews, testimonies, video materials, and existing archival information in their performances, they have proven how choreography is able to weave together factual information and embodied practices in order to question social and political realities, as well as the documentary field itself. In his 1968 essay, Notes on the Documentary Theater, Peter Weiss identified potential sources that can be used in documentary theater. According to him, these sources could include protocols, files, letters, statistical tables, stock market reports, financial statements of banking and industrial companies, government statements, speeches, interviews, statements by well-known personalities, newspaper and radio reports, photos, journal films, and other evidence of the present. In a book, Introduction to the Work of Peter Weiss, the German language and German literature professor Olaf Berwald relates to Weiss's documentary plays as intricate choreographic arrangements, as in his view, they explore new dramaturgical approaches through the choreography of documents. When thinking about including documentary material in choreographic field, which often prioritizes and at times fetishizes the performance of the dancing body, I'm interested in how documents obtain a central role, both in the process of choreographic creation, as well as in the artistic outcome, how they transform the choreographic field itself, leading to what I would like to name as documentary choreography. So the body itself could be perceived as a document, a living archive, which is constructed through its encounters with the surrounding environment and lived experiences. In the last decades, we see a lot of works which stage this type of embodied histories. The choreographer or performer recalls which type of techniques, memories, and personal history shaped his, her, or their physical self. A dance work itself could be as well looked as if it was a document. In recent years, there is a growing interest in the preservation of dance history through reenactments and restaging of canonical works, while giving them contemporary interpretation and reflection. As André Lepecki writes in his article, The Body as Archive, the Will to Reenact and the Afterlives of Dances, turning and returning to all those tracks and steps and bodies and gestures and sweat and images and words and sounds performed by past dancers paradoxically become one of the most significant mark of contemporary experimental choreography. End of quote. This trend is important for the claiming of the field's own history and evolution, but at times remains enclosed within its own boundaries. What I propose to call documentary choreography suggests that the will to archive, a concept introduced by André Lepecki in the same text, is not restricted only to the reenactments of existing choreographies, but incorporating documents coming outside from the artistic context into its corpus can be further expanded and echo other political events, social movements, and societal gestures. Furthermore, I'm interested in how the documents themselves can take center stage and to refigure or constitute anew the choreographic field. So when I was invited by Sandra, Bojana, and Francesca to take part in this series of discussion, I could not think about two last projects of mine which resonate strongly with the title of the series and what it calls us to question. In Talos, which premiered in 2017, the notion of protection is directly addressed by investigating strategies and discourses used in the securitization industry. The project investigates documents that testify about a EU-funded endeavor that strive to replace human border guards by robots. Europe is continuously fortifying its borders. More and more technological solutions are deployed to monitor its territory. Existing routes through which migrants are moving are blocked by border patrols and constructions of walls and fences. As a result, migrants choose more dangerous routes, which causes more casualties. Migrants and asylum seekers that succeed to enter the continent are pushed back by border guards. Inside Europe, migrants and asylum seekers are continuously subjected to bureaucratic borders. In addition, Europe's outer borders are continuously extended, and agreements, and there is a lot of agreements Europe is signing with its neighboring countries. These neighbors, in many of which the concept of human rights is rather loose, are using more violent tools in order to prevent migrants from approaching the European continent. And the outcome of this dreadful situation is addressed through another project which I would like to share with you today, named Necropolis. And Necropolis sets out to investigate the thousands of deaths of migrants and asylum seekers that occur on their way to the continent and also occur inside the continent. It attempts to give rise to a morbid architecture that shadows Europe's increasingly protected territory. So I will move now to focus a bit more specifically on Talos and then on Necropolis. The performance Talos is a response to Talos, T-A-L-O-S, an abbreviation which stands for Transportable Autonomous Patrol for Land Border Surveillance, an EU-funded project in the field of securitization, in the frame of which experts from 14 institutions from 10 different countries, 8 EU member states, Belgium, Estonia, Finland, France, Greece, Poland, Romania, and Spain, as well as 2 associated countries, Turkey and Israel, came together in 2007 around the idea of developing and field testing an innovative concept of mobile autonomous system for protecting European land borders. The Talos initiative promoted and researched the possibility of replacing human border guards with robots, land drones in detection missions at the borders of Europe. The total budget of the original project was 20 million euros, 13 million of which was granted by the European Union. The name of the project was not solely originated by the Talos consortium. In the old Greek myths, Talos is a giant half-man, half-machine that was sent by Zeus to the island of Crete to protect Europa. The giant would circle the island day and night and would throw giant rocks at ships that attempted to reach the shores. If any intruders made it to the shore, Talos would embrace them while making his body extremely hot and killing them with his deadly grip. And this is the myth, actually, that the EU-funded Talos consortium aimed to make into reality through technological innovation. The original Talos project resulted in a demo system which included 2 semi-autonomous ground vehicles. It was presented on 18 of April 2012 at the training ground of a military academy in Poland. On the vast field, a stage was erected, including a curtain, LCD screens, and seats for over 100 participants, representatives of border guards from different European countries, public administration and research sector, business and media. And the public could basically watch the results of the Talos research project. They were seated on the stage, and at a certain point, the curtain opened and they could see the robots moving in the field where they surveyed members of the consortium, which were wearing safety vests. And Sandra, maybe you can show the first image. This is an image from that same day, where the Talos robots were presented to potential, basically, consumers. So the Talos project was never implemented, and such system was not installed at the borders of Europe. However, as my colleagues, the dramaturgs Nienke Scholz and Jonas Rutgers mention in their article, the ultimate outcome of the Talos project should not simply be measured against the actual production of an automated vehicle, but also against the production of a specific discourse, a singular vision that shapes our imagination of the future. Moreover, as they write, the project's discourse paved the way for the future deployment of such a system. In a very subtle way, Talos intervenes in our imagination of the future, suggesting that the deployment of robotic systems is an inevitable and logical progression. So one could see our Talos, the performance Talos, as a continuation of the original Talos project. It started where the original project stopped. While the original Talos project was done outside of the gaze of the general public in a remote robotic institute in the outskirts of Warsaw, our performance aimed at bringing it to the wider audience, to center stage, so to speak, and to promote it to the general public. As such, we wanted to transform the audience to a potential consumers of the Talos technology, and as such question their position in relation to the continuous securitization of the EU borders. We can stop the image and come back. Thank you. So our performance takes the shape of a product demonstration or promotion, where a speaker is talking to the audience, accompanied by slick visualization projected onto a large screen behind him. The speaker is reading the text from 4 teleprompters that are placed in 4 corners of the theater, 2 within the seats of the audience and 2 in the back of the stage, which the audience can also see. 2 operators, technicians are seated on stage right side, responsible for activating both the prompters and the images behind the speaker. The presence of the operator and the prompters is hinting to the fact that all the speech and all the actions of the performer presenter are scripted, that he is following very precise and strict pre-decided protocol as a mechanical device, if you wish. The creative process extended to more than 3 years. When beginning to accumulate documents in relation to the original project, we acknowledge several gaps, blank spots concerning the most acute moral and ethical questions that the original Talos project evokes and embodies. Our interest, thus, was not only to present the existing information we found regarding Talos, we somehow took the liberty to use other documents, interviews, drone footage capturing border areas, developments in the field of robotics, as well as invented scenarios of a potential meeting between human and non-human agents in border areas. Using these materials of different status, we wish to point towards or draw attention of the audience to a probable future in which robotic agents will replace humans in border patrol missions. So we can run the video of Talos, please.
Borders are porous and unstable. The task of securing the border is complex. Since ancient times, humans have been busy inventing different systems for protection. In comparison to humans, robots are more durable. They never get tired. Recent developments have made significant improvement in making robots move autonomously, opening a new field of research. The Greeks imagined a giant automaton made of bronze that would protect the border of the island of Crete, Talos. Today, mobile and automated technology can correct and even replace the current European border protection system. Each device is able to patrol and cover a territory of approximately 10 kilometers. It moves and scans the environment using precise topographic simulation. The robotic device used for border patrol consists of different components that allow the device to perform its 2 main tasks: to move and to detect. When the right distance is established, the device activates the pre-recorded audio-visual announcement commanding the trespasser to leave the border area. The trespasser maintains his position, the device positions itself using the predefined distance. If the trespasser obeys the command, the devices return to their scanning mission. If the detected trespasser advances in a group by land, the squadron surrounds the group. If a large group of trespassers is detected, the network of devices deploys a different strategy. Trespassers have to be relocated. The devices calculate the shortest possible path. The devices scan for specific patterns of behavior and use facial recognition to allocate potential threats.
Thanks. So I will now move gradually to necropolis. So for over a quarter of a century, United for Intercultural Action, a network of hundreds of anti-racist organizations from all over Europe, has been compiling a list of refugees and migrants who lost their lives on their way to the continent. As of June 2021, the last updated version of the list, it contains information on 44,764 deaths, spanning 78 pages filled with a long table, each row registering one death or a group of related deaths. The table breaks each row down into 6 columns that mention the date of the reported death or deaths, the number of bodies found in that specific case, from 1 person to 1,100 persons in the deadliest case reported, the deceased name, gender, and age, if known, their origin, the cause of death, and the sources that reported the case. Although the list dates back to 1993, the vast majority of the deaths occurred after 2013. So just to add that until 2013, on the list, there was 3,000 cases reported. And since then until now, so it's 8 years, the numbers jumped to more than 44,000. When scrolling through the many pages of the list, we could not ignore the fact that only a very small number of the deceased are mentioned by name, leaving the vast majority without identifying details. Furthermore, the data is based mostly on media reports, thus it only contains those whose death was reported. The toll is certainly much higher, and many more thousands are not found and not reported. In her lecture, Bodies That Still Matter, Judith Butler questions why some populations are regarded as more grievable than others. To grieve another, she writes, is to stand in relation to that other. It is a social relation, one between people. But as she points out, it is also one that is mediated by cultural and political modes of representation. For her, depending on the public sphere in which the loss takes place, it can be registered with great lamentation, great sorrow, or it can be dismissed or covered over as if it were not a loss. When we began to work with the list, we wanted to get closer to individual cases mentioned in it. Looking at its endless details, we asked ourselves, where are these bodies? Where are actually the remains of all these bodies? Where are the physical spaces where these individuals and this whole community of dead migrants could be grieved, mourned, given respect to? Butler further argues that when populations are eradicated in war on other forms of violence that could have been avoided, the public acknowledgement of such a loss is crucial to the act of protest. We thus wondered how the list could be further investigated as a body of data, and more specifically, what practice could be articulated that would resonate with this process of dealing with the remains, with the evidence, in this case, relating directly to dead bodies, and how it could be shared with the wider public in the performative context. During the artistic process, we strive to get closer to individual death cases mentioned on the list and to find more information regarding the causes of their death. We began with a series of workshops in Stockholm in which we investigated each time an individual case of death extracted from the list. All the cases that we investigated occurred in proximity to Stockholm and to the place where the workshop took place. Using personal computers and cell phones, participants collected information from the internet related to these cases. Cases were thus reopened, revealing a more detail and in detail the causes of the death and the circumstances that led to these deaths. So the physical proximity of the people whose whereabouts we were investigating to the actual location of the workshop brought the list and the phenomena it documents closer to the participants who were unaware that such type of deaths took place in proximity of where they live. At a later residency that took place in Essen, we further articulated our search to resonate with the necessity for a physical location of mourning. After an extensive online investigation regarding several cases of death occurred nearby Essen, like the one that we did in Stockholm, we focused on one article that specifically pointed out a cemetery where a 23-year-old refugee from Sudan named Emmanuel Thomas Tut was buried. Tut died in 1993, so he was one of the first cases that the list reported from injuries as a result of attempted suicide at the detention center in a small town of Herne. The article mentioned a memorial ceremony that had taken place 10 years after his death, mentioning also the exact cemetery where he was buried. So upon discovering that the cemetery in which he was buried, we decided to visit his grave. And Sandra, you can put the next image. So visiting a cemetery always evokes a particular set of emotions. Visiting the grave of someone, one that we investigated but did not know personally, is even more particular. Walking towards the actual place where the body was buried was an overwhelming experience. A person who until that moment has been just a name on a vast list of over 44,000 people now gradually gained a physical location. Arriving at the grave of Emmanuel Thomas Tut, we each made a gesture of respect that somehow corresponded with our own rituals from our own respective cultures and our homes. We also decided to register the coordinates of the grave by measuring its longitude and latitude on our cell phones. We then made a short video documenting a walk from the cemetery gate to the grave, holding the smartphone in front of us while walking. And since that moment, we have been continuously documenting the locations of graves of migrants and asylum seekers in proximity to any place where we arrive, and gradually mapping necropolis. So our protocol is simple. We identify the places where death occurred in proximity to locations where we are, using the information available in the list of United related to this particular case. We launch online research in an effort to identify the exact locations where the deceased are buried. If online research is not enough, we make contact with local institutions, city hall archives, detention centers, NGOs, local cemeteries that might obtain information about a specific case. If our research yields results, we visit the location where the body is disposed of. Once at the exact location of the grave in question, we identify its geographical coordinates using our smartphones. If several graves are found in the same location, we measure the coordinates of each grave. We take a photo of the grave as well as register on video a walk from the gate of the cemetery to the grave. Finally, when back to our working space, we input the geographical coordinates of the grave into our database and mark it on a virtual map, attaching to it the traces of our research. This process allows us to gradually map the city of the dead. Until today, we were able to register more than 1,000 graves around Europe. On stage, seated in front of a large screen, we present the results of our investigation evoking in turn a very recent victim, an older case of death, a well-known case of a sunken ship, a suicide that took place in a detention center close by, the exact date of an incident, a walk towards a grave. The screen alters this data with Google Earth map, into which we pinpoint all the locations of the graves, in which, and the spectators are introduced to the different crime scenes. Some are far away from them, some just around the corner. With the list of death, the United Network aims at, on one hand, focusing on raising public awareness of a mass death of migrants and on policy change making. This is done through yearly upgrading and publishing the list, initiating campaigns around its publication, collaborating with different institutions in disseminating the list, translating and publishing it in collaboration with newspapers in different countries, making the data available for researchers and activists that take this mission onwards in their own contexts and communities. On the other hand, the list of deaths aim at identifying the victims through laborious, detailed work of updating and processing the database, which is the most accurate archive to date that documents death taken place in recent years due to restrictive policies of Fortress Europe. It is also aiming at naming the victims whose death is to date remains largely unacknowledged. The artistic project Necropolis that takes place in the last 4 years now joined united in these two missions. The stage performances draw the public attention to the phenomena of death at the borders while using the dispositive of the theater. They bring the topic to new audiences in various locations around Europe. The project is also assisting with the mission of dignifying the victims through the process of localizing graves of migrants. Local research is conducted in every location where the project arrives, and new cases are investigated. The search starts from a data that exists in the United Lists as a point of departure, but due to our actual presence at the specific locations and an engagement that is required from inviting parties, festivals, theaters, and residencies, more cases of deaths are identified and investigated, which are not originally in the list of United. So with our project, we were able to refine somehow the initial database of the United Network. Often when searching for and localizing the graves, we find inaccuracies, a name that is missing in the list, a country of origin that was not indicated, a wrong age. Now, there are entries in the list that we actually could clarify. To be precise, at the moment, there are 27 entries in the list of deaths that Necropolis team either added or updated. Furthermore, the performance is built as an invitation, and this invitation also stands to you all who are listening. In the beginning of the show, as I do with you now, we project information that reveals the protocol of our search, which I mentioned to you earlier, including its different steps, and we actually invite people to join the search. For us, the main task is not that you as an audience member will come to see the performance in the theater. The ultimate goal of the project is when you as a private person, as a citizen, decide to join the search and the mission of investigating and localizing. The performance is thus operating as an intermediary in the whole process. It reveals the protocol and reports which graves we have located so far. And it also points out towards all the graves that are still to be searched, all the deaths that are still to be investigated. And we can watch the last video. that's what I somehow prepared, and yeah, I'm happy to talk to you.
Super, thank you, Arkadi. Thank you very much for bringing this work. And I was just thinking, revisiting it, kind of that documentary. The documentary element, of course, has this dimension of recollecting data, of giving visibility, like archival quality, but also how regenerative and transformative it becomes in particular these projects. I wanted to ask you, like in particular Talos and Necropolis, but also other projects that you have been working on, like Archive and a solo work from 2011. You work really with NGOs, with associations, policymakers, peace activists, you know, very many different people. And when it comes to factual information, documentary, I'm curious about work ethics and about how to reconcile different, let's say, levels of consequence that come, let's say, as an artist, but also from all the other different positions and different agendas that come into play. And if you could, so yeah, tell us a bit about these networks of collaboration, but also in relation to ethics, work ethics.
Yeah, thank you for going straight into the core of the the most acute complexity of these projects, and I think the main idea or the main kind of trajectory that we took when approaching these existing documents and existing archives is to remain somehow fruitful to their original task. And this goes also to, as you see, specifically in Necropolis, and I think in Archive, it is more evident that we use, we really use information from the actual archive. We really expose and like you mentioned, we transform the archive using the SEMIC dispositive, but remaining very truthful to the actual mission. And I think in this sense, the ethical kind of engagement and concern and also kind of carefulness, let's say, is becoming very very crucial in the project themselves, and this resulted actually in the case of Necropolis into a larger collaboration that we're now making with United, for example, with the organization that produces and updates the list. As such, I see it as a kind of as a kind of a positive feedback, let's say, to the actual position that we are taking when actually using the information that these organizations are producing.
Thank you. I'd like to invite everyone to please join the conversation. I see Bojana has a question, but also to everyone here in the chat, give us a sign in the chat or just yeah, speak up and then we can open this. Bojana, please.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much, Arkadi, for this lecture and presentation. I was just thinking I would like to return a little bit more to this, what you also introduced about works with the notion of the documentary choreography, and return to these two works you presented, because I see them also quite different works somehow. And I was very, how to say, touched by this, what you also said with Necropolis, how I think especially also because of this work of mourning you are actually doing through this collaboration and research, performance becomes somehow a secondary or an intermediary. And in the first work, the performance is a kind, maybe that was my perspective, but maybe you can tell us more, it's still like a kind of in the center. Performance is a space of a particular visibility of a particular practices, and here performance is really like a side effect, or that what comes with the work of mourning. For me, it was very clear that actually this work of mourning is primary, what you do. And if you can just talk a little bit about that and how then to connect that to the notion of documentary choreography, or where it can appear, where it becomes visible, or I think there are really like two different articulations, at least from my perspective, how I listen to you and what I saw here.
Yeah, thank you, Bojana. I agree with you, and I think I can draw from what I said from the previous question that being truthful to the document itself also somehow paves a certain let's say dramaturgical decisions, or somehow keeping very close to and reading. I can say very deep, let's say, because also the projects are super long. I mean, the research project extends over 3-4 years in both of these projects. I think there is no a certain clear dispositive when we start to work on the projects. In this sense, they are really evolving into something which appears slowly through the reading and through the kind of the core of that embodied in a sense with we like inside the original material. And indeed, in Talos we had this opportunity really to speculate, and this is what the project aimed for. They speculated this technology to be implemented in Europe, and as such we also allowed ourselves to speculate about a possible encounter when people, the wider audience, comes to the theater and introduced and promoted and almost encouraged to consume this kind of technology. Of course, also hinting to how this kind of strategies of protection are already somehow embodied in us, and how these discourses of securitization are already part of our discourse. And in Necropolis, the reading into the document, I can say, often evoked a sense of despair, total despair. How can we contain this information? And I remember a talk with Sandra that we had when I was in this kind of breaking point with this material, and I asked Sandra, how can I even touch this material? And Sandra was very wise to comment and to switch my question and to ask me, maybe you should ask yourself, how can you not touch this document? How can you ignore it? How can you leave it aside? And I think this kind of paved to a process where the neglect towards this community came more and more apparent through the investigation and through the time that we spend with it. And thus this absence of ritual, this absence of acknowledging this vast community, which the list of United kind of reports only part of it, and indeed this lack of commemoration, this lack of also engagement led us to this specific proposition that we propose in the performance, and also through this kind of encounters where we really invite people to imagine collectively another type of gesture, another type of ritual that we can do privately, but also collectively, leading to, if you can call it, even a choreography of coming towards and acknowledging this type of death.
Thank you, Arkadi.
Thank you.
Francesca, you wanted to intervene?
Yes. Yes, thank you also from my side very much for this presentation. And I also had, like Bojana, a question about how the two works relate more. I mean, you're talking already about it, and in the sense of how the audience is addressed. So in what position is the audience brought, because they seem to do two different things, so to work on two different levels that maybe are both needed. And as far as I understood this, this second one in a way invites the audience or brings the audience less through the body of the performance, more to something you named in the beginning of the talk as a choreography of documents, which struck me as a because you see this data and these different ways of with Google Maps, and then this filming on this very direct. So it's a sort of a change between abstract or distance data that in a way give a view to this more intimate situation. And there I wonder how Iris is participating in the ritual or through these documents, through this video, but at the same time also getting a view or being kind of led to also maybe a critical view on themselves, on this lack of knowledge that is also imposed, of course, because all this is kept secret, and you need to research to engage, but there is maybe also this sort of critical dimension. And the other, the Talos seems to be more addressing the audience differently, in a way making them having a stronger critical impact on them. So maybe you can tell a bit more, since I'm just getting familiar with your work.
Yes, I think the audience, or the position of the audience are a continuous kind of question in these projects, because it is I see the creative process and the work eventually as a kind of mediation between the audience, the spectators, and the material that I'm working with. So, and indeed, like you mentioned, there is indeed very different relation to the position of the audience to this position of sitting and watching, and I think we are a lot in the processes. We ask ourselves, what is this watching? How can we activate the audience and bring a certain and make a step towards themselves questioning their own position as an audience? And indeed, the strategy in Talos is quite particular, also using kind of similar strategies of similar projects when we are introduced to technologies which somehow supposed to propose as solutions, and I would even go further and say easy solutions. So delegating the actual act of interacting with somebody at the border, which is clearly a very complex situation, to delegating it to a machine. And this is kind of a strategy that is used often in weapon industry, and even in relation to objects that we are consuming, like phones and computers. So we wanted somehow to use the same strategies that are used in these industries, and a lot of time these industries are kind of masking a certain problematics. They're masking the real situations that they are dealing with in relation to Talos. It is this encounter, this very, let's say, questionable moment of a non-human agent and a human that are meeting, masking it with a certain layer. And in Talos, it's really this visualizations, these kind of sleek animations that are actually done on top of real footage, which is then, as you saw in the end of the video, are kind of stripped and the audience kind of being revealed to the manipulation that we did to them kind of in the beginning. So I think then there is a kind of a break, there is a bug in the system, and a certain activation is happening through this realization that you are actually being, you've been fooled in a certain way. And in Acropolis, yes, I think the main thing that me and Igor Dobricic and Emma Joya, who are kind of the core group that were working on this project, wanted to create is not a kind of a moralistic position of the audience where they are kind of overwhelmed with this kind of information. And Igor was stressing that he wants to really give a certain tool, give a certain gesture, give a certain proposition to the audience where they have a certain way that they can engage, they can choose to engage. And in this sense, it kind of evolved in this whole process and in the whole dramaturgy of the overall project, is that actually it is an invitation. It starts with an invitation, and what you see on the screen is actually all these invitations that are being taken by someone and people who decided to go and to localize. Mm-hmm. So I think. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. There is very different strategies, and again, I think they come from the interrogation of the documents and from a certain layer that we want to emphasize in the original documents.
Thank you. Livia, you were wanting to intervene.
Hi, could you hear me? Okay. I would like to thanks a lot, Arkadi. We don't meet since a long time, actually since Sant'Arcangelo a lot of years ago. So I actually were placed in another moment of the creative process when your body was still moving a lot on stage. So I'm really enthusiastic and also curious about this evolution, because I mean, I follow you through the newsletter, but I'm also far away from Europe now. I'm in another continent because I'm doing my research project for dance master in Brazil. And so I'm also in another kind of tuning, let's say. So I was thinking a lot about this problem of continent borders, and also about how manage violence, because here is also a problem somehow, but is in a different scale and also has different traditions, violence. For instance, in Brazil nowadays, for Bolsonaro and for politics and so on. So I was thinking a little bit, because I remember you were already working about violence, especially about Israeli and Palestine when you were presenting your first works in Europe, how you do a kind of evolution about this. And somehow my question would be like kind of similar of the last ones, like for you, if choreography is still media for dance, or if choreography is an expanding poetic field, or where are body in choreography, this kind of banal questions for dancers like us. And so I was a little bit curious because, for instance, at the moment, I will not take so much time, but I'm working about presence of bodies in samba times, because Bolsonaro cut off the carnival. So we don't have carnival, but people are still in resistance. So somehow I think that dancing body are still a problem in the world for people who want to act in a violent mood. I don't know if it's clear, but this was the question.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I mean, I very much agree with you, and I could relate to it specifically about archive and the work that is being done. It was observing a certain, let's say, I would claim, dance that is happening in the social sphere. Specifically, I'm talking about actions of violence performed by soldiers and settlers in the West Bank. So it looked at the performance of the body in the social sphere, and as such, I connect with your interrogation of this or of your observation of the local context with the presence of bodies in the social sphere. And when I moved to Europe, and this led to the two projects that I'm presenting you today, and my focus shifted to a new territory, to a new continent, but also to a problematics of or a larger question of what happens when bodies are prevented movement. And as such, I somehow maybe naively applied the same strategy towards my own body. I said, I don't want, or I think, at least in my head, I didn't find the motivation to dance when thinking about these questions, to dance on stage when thinking about these questions. Rather, I wanted to, and like you say, use the expansion of choreography in order to interrogate a certain movement that is happening on the social sphere. But in both Talos and Necropolis, it's a very particular movement. It's in Talos, we can say it's an ideological movement and a potential movement of a certain possible future. And somehow, although we thought about these ideas of what if I will interact with a machine on stage, but then it all felt redundant in relation to the overall situation that we were addressing. It is almost kind of lowering the, I don't know, making it ironic in a space where we should evoke much more criticality towards the situation. And the same with the Necropolis, where basically the movement of people is stopped it's ultimately stopped by the system by causing their deaths. So how can I dance this? How can I be present on the stage? And I think it is addressed again in the performance as a kind of I mean, I think there is a question towards our presence on the stage, because it still acknowledges somehow our privilege. We are seated, we are scrolling through database, we are scrolling through information that is about people who died to arrive to the place where we are seated. So again, I think again through this, our being seated together somehow with the audience in front of this database, there is a kind of provocation to ask that we are all managing this database. We are all kind of practicing and managing this morbid database. So I don't know if it answers, but I tried to map through your comments.
Thank you. Is there other questions or comments or contributions at large? Bernhard, please.
Thanks, Sandra, and thanks to you, Arkadi, for the talk. It was very intense and at times very gripping, especially when it comes to the footage. And I am now very busy with your when you answered now, you somehow differentiated the approaches to the audience. When it comes to also a little bit the manipulation or the idea of being a trickster in the first piece or in the first project, and then when it comes to an invitation. And I am now thinking, and this might sound a little bit provocative now, if Necropolis is really what you would call a choreographic documentation. The thing is that is it a documentary choreography, or isn't it already a choreographic documentation, in that you use choreographic tools to invite those in the audience to take part in this idea of going out, finding something. You somehow turned it around, because especially what you do not do is a danse macabre, as the art historian would say. You do not somehow put on stage and let the dead bodies dance, but you actually let the audience dance or come into the play, and you invite them on stage. And I think this is really it's a super strong approach, actually. And I think it's also even more gripping, because with the appeal that you have and with the questions that you have, and also with, it's not only an invitation, it's a task that I have after seeing the show. I have to dance. I have to say, even if I do not do anything, it is a decision, and I somehow am caught up in your choreography. And I think this is super strong, and this touched me very much. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the comment. I think, I mean, I showed you the first part of the performance, and this performance, this part lasts for about an hour, and this first part that you saw, part of the first part that you saw, is lasting most of it, like 45 minutes. And indeed, you are kind of taken through this very slow pace, where slowly you're zooming out from where you are. So we start the scroll of the map from the theater, and we slowly zoom out to discover places of death that are close to where we are, and then further and further and further into the outskirts of Europe, where we also visit mass graves. But there is another part of the show, which is a total and radical and very morbid shift. In this part, through a collaboration with an artist who is dealing with objects, creating objects which are very similar to human tissue. We constructed a ghost. We lay on the table that you see on stage. There is beside us an empty table, and this table becomes almost like a forensic room, where we're laying out parts which eventually constitute a body, and eventually this body appears on a screen through 3D visualization, and it is dancing his dance macabre. Basically, it's only trying to rise and stand in front of us. It's not dancing, but it's just attempting to face us. And I must say that the experience is even more gripping, and this shift that you are describing, even more gripping with this really radical shift from this very slick, very almost neutral, very detached interrogation of a database into the action of touching actual body parts. This is the part that some people usually would leave the theater, because it's unbearable in its realness, and a lot of people ask if it's real or not. But it's also there is a text also going through the work. It appears in three parts, and it's kind of the third element of this overall dramaturgy. And text is a kind of a voice of someone that takes us through this city. And I think in the last part, which is exactly in this dance macabre, I think our positions as spectators is addressed even more profoundly, and the collapse of the theater addressed more profoundly, where we say this would be the moment to clap, to exchange feedbacks with your peers, and to go out of the theater. But we kind of try to destroy this theater, and to say you cannot walk anymore outside without acknowledging who are you stepping on. And in that sense, I think that let's say the invitation becomes even more crucial. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or? Yes, Julia, no?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Arkadi, thank you very much for your lecture, and Sandra and Bojana and Francesca also for the opportunity. I was very impressed by a paper by Frédéric Pouliat about your work. This paper was like really informed me a lot about how to think about the relation between archive, choreography, and body movement relations. So I was thinking if the very nature of your subject, like the death of people or the absence of the movement in your archival material is not the main maybe issue to go to the body and to, you know, try to find means to translate these histories into bodily movements, because it's so vivid, the bodily movement in your, at least in your work archives, that Frédéric so beautifully wrote about. So in our final discussion now, I'm thinking if the subject, I mean, the very death theme is not the difficulty to, you know, goes to the body and find means to address bodily your subject.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the absence is the main guiding line in the project, because it's not only absence of the bodies, it's also absence of information, it's absence of engagement, it's absence of identifying details, and as such, I mean, you mentioned the physical engagement. There is something, and I mean, I think the people who did engage can testify. There is something very crucial in the actual research and how it is built, in the sense that you are investigating somebody that you don't know, and you try to identify where his body is, and eventually try to come in proximity to his or her body. This coming in proximity is a very physical engagement. It's also a very emotional engagement. And in that sense, I feel that although it seemingly the project is the movement is absent, actually it is very much present, and I think the steps behind the camera that you see while approaching the graves are proposing a certain embodied gesture, not only by the person that is doing this gesture and approaching the grave, but also the audience collectively in the theater are approaching together towards that grave. And in this sense, I do feel that when the movement that I take the audience through is even much more crucial in a sense in Necropolis, because of the devices that it incorporates and the kind of almost immersive dispositive it produces.
Yeah, I think we have time for maybe a last comment or question, contribution. I mean, I was also just thinking, Arkadi, about how to maintain these choreographies or these choreographic projects, no? Because of course, like also working with institutions, working with researchers, the process and so on, you mentioned they extend over a couple of years. I think even though they work with very different strategies, there is kind of a logic unfolding, no? So I'm also wondering how to, practically realize this kind of work, because it also means that institutions need to become part of that that engagement that you call civic engagement. And maybe also interesting that at least today you don't refer to the work that you're doing as activist work also, no? You're still insisting on this, on situating it in the realm of choreography. So is there any maybe last comment? If not, Arkadi, thank you so much for taking the time and introducing us to the work, and also for being so generous about sharing your thoughts and the research with us. This is actually the last session of this lecture series that has been a very wonderful collaboration with Bojana Kunst, Francesca Raimondi, Anna Wagner, and in particular also thanking the HTA, who has been not only funding but enabling this project in the first place. I would like to also thank those people that are not always visible, which is Martin Bean, who is here with us, who has been absolutely great in organizing, communicating, and taking care also of the Zoom. Igor Strohmeyer, who is here, our technical support, recording, and so on. And I'm also just seeing Ingo Diel, who is actually the director of the HTA Academy. So I just want to say there is very many people, and of course all the students of the seminars that have been accompanying us and discussing with us. I know extensive credits are always a little bit like maybe long for others, but I would like to insist on saying that all of the videos will be online until end of March on the website of the HTA. So you can revisit or check again. And as a very last thing, I would like to say that we will continue this discussion in a project at Mousonturm Theater in Frankfurt in July. Bodies Unprotected, July 6 till 9. And I am somehow hoping to see some of you in person then. So thank you all. Have a very nice evening. And merci, Arkadi. It was great to continue the conversation tonight.
Thank you.